Before we get into China's actions, let's start with the Philippines' summer drills, which means togetherness, and the visit of South Korea's president to Manila. This year's summer drills take place off Luzon, close to Taiwan, involving Australia, Canada, France, Japan, the US and the Philippines. 1,000 personnel participate in high-intensity exercises focusing on anti-submarine, anti-surface and anti-air warfare. And as they got underway, South Korean President Jerzewski and Ferdinand Marcos Jr. signed a strategic partnership in Manila. This is what Yoon had to say.
양국은 안보 분야에서 전략적 협력을 강화해 나가기로 했습니다. 우리 두 정상은 방산 협력을 강화하기로 했으며 특히 필리핀의 군 현대화 3단계 사업에 한국이 적극 참여해 나가기로 했습니다.
The development builds on comments made by South Korea's ambassador to the Philippines in September of raising their partnership in maritime security to a higher level, as both countries mark 75 years of diplomatic relations this year. Professor Chen, I'd like to start with you. So the Philippines, as we can see, is gathering more and more global support. Does the South Korean strategic partnership mean that we can see more involvement from South Korea, for example, in summer drills?
I think it is true that we can see South Korea will take part and play a role in Philippines' security matters, especially based on what we have known recently. South Korea is willing to support in terms of defense industry, in terms of maritime security surveillance, and maybe training. So, but military drill together with Philippines might take a little bit more time to fulfill. The trip of the South Korean president this time focused mainly on economic cooperation. There are a lot of economic assistance in infrastructure building projects. So security agreement, of course, is another important thing, but not the major thing during his visit.
And what do you think about Coast Guard cooperation? Do you think that there could be joint South Korean and Philippine Coast Guard patrols?
I do think that this is what the Philippines want. I think South Korea will consider this seriously. There is a possibility that South Koreans will send its Coast Guard vessels to the vicinity of the Philippine Sea. And we have to wait and see. I cannot make a right assessment right now.
Marcin, so what does the support of South Korea, which is another middle power in the region, also a US treaty ally, of course, what does that mean to the Philippines in terms of the bigger picture of protecting its sovereignty against China?
At the end of the day, money matters, and it is important that we don't overlook the commercial dimension of closer security and defense ties between South Korea and the Philippines. One of the core tenets of President Yoon's economic development strategy was to boost South Korea's role as an important exporter of arms and defense equipment. By 2027, Korea is slated to become the fourth largest exporter of defense articles globally. And at the same time, there is clear synergy with the Philippines. The country decided to spend over $35 billion over the next decade to modernize its army and other branches of the military amid threats from China. So at the end of the day, this commercial dimension is of great importance.
Yeah, so there is the supply and the demand in this relationship. Professor Chen, a Chinese missile ship chased a Philippines fisheries vessel. It was meant to be resupplying fishermen near or at Half Moon Bay. The same Chinese Navy ship then directed its military-grade laser up at a fisheries plane in the sky 3 times. How dangerous is such a move?
So these weapons, these laser pointers, will temporarily blind the pilots of an aircraft. So it is dangerous, and aircraft pilots will try to avoid them. So this is why many countries condemn this kind of action, because it can crash the airplane. Even though it will not cause permanent blindness of the pilot, a temporarily blindness will be very dangerous during the flight.
It could still be fatal.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference, isn't there, between this incident and the earlier incident where they used this against a vessel. I believe it was a Philippine Coast Guard. Do you see that as an escalation then?
Well, I think this has become a routine that the Chinese Coast Guard is doing in South China Sea. Unfortunately, this has a certain degree of danger in it, because as you temporarily blind the vessel or a flight, it can cause the vessel or flight to crash. So it is a dangerous move. But I wouldn't say China escalate the situation. China just try to use this for a very long time.
Right. Marcin, how about the Chinese Navy vessel? It was a missile ship, chasing a Philippine government or civilian vessel. The optics of this is not very good.
The optics are not very good, but these activities is something that we should be expecting from the People's Liberation Army, because all these activities, whether we're talking about the use of high-grade lasers or Chinese Navy vessels chasing civilian vessels from the Philippines, all of these activities can be summarized as PLA's psychological warfare. And already in 2003, the PLA has lined out very explicitly its three-pronged strategy of political warfare, consisting of legal warfare, public opinion warfare, and importantly, psychological warfare. So all these activities can be summarized as an effort to influence the psyche of the opponent, in this case of Filipino stakeholders, and threaten them or psychologically coerce them into yielding to China's demands.
Yeah, so all part of the grey zone tactics and campaign that essentially have seen China take control of a large part of the South China Sea? Absolutely,
and I fully agree with Professor Chen that these activities do not necessarily constitute a major escalation, but rather are a manifestation of cementation of use of these intimidation grey zone tactics in the region. But we can zoom out even more, because China is using very similar tactics in other parts of the Indo-Pacific theater. Already in 2018, a Chinese base in Djibouti has used high-level military-grade lasers to blind in a very similar way pilots of American aircraft. So it is, not to belay the point, but it is hardly a new tool in China's toolbox of intimidation across the